Hello there, and welcome to this ClueCon Weekly. It's great to be here in the ClueCon Weekly podcast studio this week with Gavin Henry. How are you doing, Gavin?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. It's really good to have you along. And I think you're coming to us live for this recording, at least, from Scotland. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's quite cold today up in just outside Aberdeen.
Just outside Aberdeen. I can't remember. Is that a little bit further north than Glasgow and Edinburgh?
About 2 to 3 hours up from there on the northeast coast.
Excellent.
Beautiful place to be, if I don't say so.
Yeah, indeed. I've got very fond memories of when I have been to Scotland and places like the Isle of Skye, but don't get there very often, sadly. Anyway, it's good to have you along, Gavin. And we've known each other for quite some time. Just before we hit the record button, you were saying, did you think it was 2009, something along those lines?
Yeah, I think when I was, before I started, just the year before I started SureVoIP, I went down to an IP expo thing. I remember sitting around a table with you, telling you my ideas and stuff. So that would have been almost 11 years now, I think. Yeah, 11 years.
Time moves on pretty quickly, doesn't it?
It's flown past, yeah.
Absolutely. And when we met, as you said, you were coming into the business and preparing for SureVoIP. But before we get to that bit, tell us how you got into the telecoms business in the first place, Gavin, and how you discovered the power of open source technology.
Well, I did electronics and communications engineering degree and kind of got into telecoms that way. My first job was as a graduate engineer doing things from 50 hertz up to 50 gigahertz. But it was all in the world of sort of proprietary PBXs. And I remember in my third year of uni, I bought this electronics simulator program called Multisim. My computer died, I swapped computers and it didn't work. And it turned out to be something to do with a hard drive signature. And I mentioned that to a job placement I was on, a guy at Halliburton. And he gave me this Unix Utils DVD, and Red Hat 6. I said, "Oh, go boot up your computer with this and then change the hex signature of your hard drive." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "What's this other stuff?" And he says, "Oh, this is Linux, you know." And from that point on, and that was 2001, pretty late into the game of the whole open source free software movement, I was just hooked. And because of that, I got a 2-2 at university because I was busy dual booting Red Hat Linux and all the computer labs, and got my
respectable,
job.
Gavin. Still respectable.
Yeah, I got my job before I graduated, and I was the only one in the whole place running Linux. And so when a virus got in, I was still working and everything was down. I just had this niggle about open source for small businesses, you know, and got permission to start a business that way. But I came into the sort of VoIP movement around 2004 when Asterix really splashed onto the scene, and you could buy an analog card for, you know, like a tenner. And then that just opened my eyes to that whole part of things. I was like, oh, every business should be using this, and you know, you get all these cool things. That kind of takes me up to where we met from about 2006. I was just shifting free PBX boxes, little support contracts just by myself, you know, as a consultant. I was reselling another well-known VoIP provider in the UK for about 3 years, but just wanted to move up and, you know, think I could do it better, and not understanding how difficult all is behind the scenes. And I think when we met, I was just doing my R&D for marketing and pricing, getting ready to make the SureVoIP.co.uk website live. So yeah, I really enjoyed that first Asterix book that came out. Didn't really know FreeSwitch was sort of not born then, and that took us on until about, I think, didn't FreeSwitch start properly in 2010? Is that?
Well, no, it's been there about 2005, 2006.
Yeah, it wasn't long after.
But yeah, indeed.
Anthony got fed up of the whole ecosystem that he was in and moved out, didn't he?
That's right. Tony created FreeSwitch, you know, to be more of a carrier grade platform. That was the aim.
Yeah. So I think I got into that probably 2009 as well, 2010. So that's the short version of how I got to that part. And haven't looked back.
Yeah, what I've noticed is that, despite, as you said, things being pretty complex as you start to build out into the world of telecom infrastructure and having your own service and platform, but you've plugged away, Gavin, over the years, and you've actually got your own ITSP, and I believe you do hosted and all sorts of things now.
Yeah, it was always my dream to be the person I was reselling, and it was just it felt so unattainable and unachievable, because it was just, an ISP is just this massive, complicated thing that you think. But like you said, if you just chip away at little bits, and the real turning point for me actually was a podcast I heard on Radio 4 in the UK, which was a dramatization of a book called Tubes, The History of the Internet. I think that was the subtitle. It's basically an American journalist that he got his fiber optic cable in America chewed through by a squirrel, and he had the idea to follow that cable and document how it all mapped together. And he had this blueprint that I was reading on holiday in 2012 in Mallorca in the evenings, about how data centers work, how you get IP addresses, how your special ID on the internet, your autonomous system number works, and RIPE and ARIN and APIC and all these different things that govern how you become an ISP. ISP mapped it out, and I was like, oh, this is meant to be, here's my recipe, and kind of went from there, from 2010 to just renting kit and co-locating, to putting out a tender to help me design to become an ISP. I think it was, I know it was the 1st of March 2014 we actually switched all of our customers over to our own network in London. And just that's when it took off, because we were independent and had full quality control over as much as you can.
That must have been a bit of a momentous occasion, putting everybody onto your own infrastructure.
I remember placing the purchase order on my birthday in 2013 with a big glass of wine, going, well, it's either works or it doesn't, because up until that point, the VoIP stuff was okay as consultancy, but my main thing was LDAP consultancy, which I still do a bit of, and we won quite a few big councils and all companies, but they normally do 3-year contracts. So I took the last big check I was going to get from one of the councils and used that to buy all the Juniper kit. Right. And it was kind of make or break at that point. Soak test it for, I think it was 9 months, and then we went live and switched over. To be fair, I had a lot of help along the way. Simon at Simwood, he helped us out a lot at the beginning. A lot of people are just so generous, and especially in the free switch community. I remember a guy called David Nell, who's another ITSP. He shared a recipe for free switch of how to connect into BT. So I try and pay back as much as I can and help out whenever I see people like that, and sponsor open source projects and things. Most of the stuff that we use, we contribute to, and always sponsor ClueCon. I don't think we're doing it this year. I need to check. But the past few years we have, and anything core we try to make open source. So it's just a lovely place to be and work, from a technology point of view as well.
Yeah, the community is very, very powerful, as you say, in terms of helping each other out, and that spirit of, as you've received, you try to give back, which is great. So, Gavin, I think you've got a slide to show us, or maybe a few slides to show us. Is now the right time to switch over and do that?
Yeah, it was just to show you a bit of the network stuff.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to pop you into the top, and so we've got you there. Excellent. I can see the map.
It's just a quick slide about network. So what I sort of explain is we're as high as we can go on the network level now, similar to some of the big telcos in the UK, and we're as high as we can go in the UK telecom sector as well. Those green bits that say BT SS7 links, that's you directly connected into the UK phone network.
Right.
That's as high as you can go. So as far as my vision is concerned, we're kind of done on that, other than having more dots on the map. You know, we've got as much.
More points of presence.
Yeah, more pops. We've got more, as much technical capability as most telcos, just obviously commercially smaller. I do have ambitions to maybe do some of this in Europe and potentially the States, but you know, we're a small business. There's 7 of us. It's a
Goodness me,
lifestyle.
7, Gavin. I remember was Victor the name of your first employee?
Yeah,
Is that right?
Victor's still with us. This is his 10th year.
Oh,
So
I remember when you took him on.
Yeah, it's just he's been really, really good. Me and him just joke and laugh about where we've come from. You know, a little office with kind of a boiler in the corner, to sort of double. You know, it's not a massive vision of growth, you know, but it's been really fun, and I'm really grateful and lucky for everything that's gone on. But you know, if you just keep chipping away and doing what you believe in, you know, it all comes together. So that's kind of what we built. That's just now the ongoing life cycle of upgrading kit. We did a massive upgrade at Christmas. That went okay. It wasn't the smoothest upgrade, but we now have capability to do, what was it? I think it was like 160,000 Netflix HD movies per second, something like that. 800 gig per second. I probably got that wrong.
Quite a bit of bandwidth there, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're ready to grow. So that's given us a good platform to get into. I'll just bring this over so I can see you again. To get into video. So a lot of other ITSPs that I see in the UK with their apps and things just seem to do voice, because I think you're doing video on AWS or Google, it's expensive for the traffic.
Gavin, let's just pause for a moment, because I know video and your soft client and things are relatively new additions, but I wonder if you could just spend a moment telling us exactly where you are now in terms of what you've got in the way of hosted and ITSP capabilities, and also perhaps tell us about where FreeSwitch fits into that as well, please.
Yeah, sure. So FreeSwitch is our SPCs. So we've got a couple in London, a couple in Edinburgh. Excuse me. Then OpenSIP sits in front of the more FreeSwitch things that power our hosted VoIP platform. So basically a device can connect and make and receive calls. We also use FreeSwitch directly connected in with our API clusters. So when you're doing click to call or anything like that, it comes in there. And when you control the call, it works directly there. The past 2 years, we've deployed a new FreeSwitch platform, so 1.10 with OpenSIPs in front, and that speaks directly to CG rates. So we use a cluster of FreeSwitch boxes with the CG rates agent, FreeSwitch agents on, and that's just beautiful. It's all like Ansibled up and just push a button and it's all brilliant with tests and all this type of stuff. So
sounds good. And by the way,
we're just trying to get that fully in production.
Sorry, I interrupted there. I was just going to mention that we have interviewed Dan Christian Bogos of CG Rates fame.
Yeah, I love Dan.
Here
I've
on
got so much time for Dan.
ClueCon
I was just watching his SIP Chronicles one on Saturday, was it? He did the live one. And some of the stuff he's producing is just awesome. They've added on SIP routing, so they'll do SIP redirects, and it's in my open source sort of career and history, it's one of the best open source projects I've seen, much like FreeSwitch, for the quality and their dedication to, you know, being pure through and through open source. Just hats off to them. I won't take my hat off because I've got lockdown haircut, but hats off. Virtually.
Yeah, and then on top of all that, Dan is a lovely guy as well, isn't he?
Yeah,
nice family man, getting on with his open source project there.
Yeah, we started things and to do with SureVoiP Mobile, which we're just reworking because the first version kind of failed, and it's powering. CGH is powering a new product that we've launched with a partner called Status Tone. Was basically when you guys created SignalWire. I love the 2-word name, so I just went onto the Wikipedia telecoms page and looked for some, something like that, and found Status Tone, so trademarked that over here. And that's a product that uses CG Rates and FreeSwitch. So CG Rates has a key lookup kind of core thing like Redis, which is really fast. So we use that to enable and toggle features. And basically, when you make and receive a call, an agent can be on the phone, enters a PIN number, and then it scoops off the DTMF using FreeSwitch's bind meta app function.
Right.
And then posts those DTMF to another API, so you can take off the credit cards, and means that you're free to, there's a lot more behind it, but that's a small version. So you're free to record the call and not worry about any credit card stuff.
So you've created a PCI compliant offering there.
Yeah, so that's one thing. We've just done we've done 3 R&D tax claims. So in the UK, if you're creating anything innovative, you can get some money back from the government. So we're on our 3rd year of that, because we've been claiming for our API work, and we've created this. It's open source. This big WebSocket real-time thing, whereby it connects into FreeSwitch event sockets, and then we can subscribe or unsubscribe to activities on numbers, basically to drive a wall board and an agent operator console.
Right.
So we've created that, and that's all powered by Perl, which is something you don't hear much, but Perl 7's just been announced, and I'm doing a podcast on that next month, actually. And that powers all of our sort of revenue generating code. So that's another real-time thing that is done.
Yeah, Gavin, before you carry on, you mentioned that is open source. Where can people find details of that?
It's on CPAN. It's called Message Passing. So I think there's a FreeSwitch plugin. It's basically a product, an open source thing called Zero Message Queue,
Right.
which they call it TCP sockets on steroids. There's things like I forget the name. It begins with K. It's a big message passing framework. Basically, it plugs into FreeSwitch, and then you scoop off what you want and do what you want with it. Kind of like the SignalWire backend that you've got, SignalWire thing. So yeah, I can drop you a link for that.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
The other thing we sponsored, which is open source, which I was speaking about on the it wasn't on this, it was something else. It's because we used Flutter last year for the first app we did, that you can find on the app stores. Not a proof of concept, but just to get a feel for the whole going through the journey of Apple and Google things. I've always wanted to do our own software. So have a first-class app that you can download off the App Store, sign up, and off you go. The moment we use Counterpath Bria, that everyone will be familiar with, really great, but it's not, you can brand it, but it's not a proper immersive experience. So last year I was working with Flutter, and I noticed that there wasn't a SIP thing, Flutter, Google's app development framework. There was in React Native, but that just kind of hurts my eyes, that React Native thing. So I fell in love with Flutter. So basically what we ended up doing is...
Gavin, sorry, let me just stop you. Did you say it's called Flutter?
Yeah, Flutter.
And what, can you just explain a little bit more about that, please?
That is Google's framework for creating mobile apps.
Right, and it's alternative. It's an alternative to React Native, is it?
Yeah, so it's you write things in Dart, which is an open source language. Flutter is really the UI rendering engine, so it creates the widgets and the rows and the columns and all that type of stuff. And then the back end is Dart. So when you create an application, it comes with an iOS Apple bit and an Android bit, and it boots up a Dart runtime and then runs these widgets. So it's slightly different. It's different from React Native because that's got a JavaScript bridge, which translates APIs. This is, they say it's faster, and it's just really nice to work in, and I fell in love with it. But there's no sort of VoIP back end to it. There's WebRTC, but because
Right.
we're ITSP, there's no SIP bit. So we were looking at doing SIP over WebSockets, which is the way you do it on Elio and OpenSIPs. If you choose that for your signaling part of WebRTC, and because we're an ITSP, we do. So basically, I sponsored porting over JS SIP from the JavaScript world to create a Dart version. So it cost us quite a few $1,000s at Christmas time. Open source that. So basically, the core of our real-time comms app is open source, and it's just taken off. You know, do you remember the lad from Noji that created the first asterisk click-to-call browser plugin? Maybe
Was it Snap?
It was called Noji. It's an Australian company.
Oh.
And it was like one of the things you reached to do click-to-call in the browser and on the desktop. He's picked it up and he's sorted out loads of bugs. There's so many other people that have used it on weird devices. There's people helping out in the issue tracker. So now that we're coming to actually use it ourselves on our own product, it's six months old, and it's been tested all over the place. You know, there's quite a few issues that we'll get on to either paying to be fixed or, you know, I'll drill into it.
Let me just stop you and ask to give the details again. So you've ported JSIP, that well-known implementation, and you ported it over, did you say to Dart?
To Dart, D-A-R-T.
Dart.
Which is the language. It's a language by itself, but it's what runs Flutter.
Right.
So it means it's got a native SIP infrastructure now.
Okay, and you've kept that project, the Dart version of JSIP, as an open source thing?
Yeah, that's always been, that was sponsored and made open source from day one. So that's the same guys that created the WebRTC framework for Flutter and Dart. So I just approached them and said, look, we want to use that, but with SIP. I've looked at SIP.js, which is a fork of JS SIP. Really love JS SIP and the guys behind that. The code looks fantastic. You know, it looks like it can be translated. I don't have time. Can I pay you guys to do it? It'll be open source. And they jumped on it.
Brilliant.
Now it's in the community, been used by loads of different companies, and it just means you've got that nice core, a solid core for our own app. And I'm just at that stage now to start incorporating it. Funnily enough, OpenSIPs just released. I don't know if Camille have got it. Maybe we've just released version 3.1 beta, almost 2 months ago now, with RFC 8599 support, which is an RFC that came out last year, which documents how you use push notifications for SIP.
Right.
Basically, if you're getting a call, a push message comes in the background, wakes up your app, and then the app registers to FreeSwitch or whatever to say I'm here. It's really nice. So it's just like, again, like finding that book and hearing on the radio, everything just seems to be slotting into place to be there when I need it in time. Maybe us sponsoring that feature at Christmas has, you know, moved that forward, but
that's a very positive thing to do. And I noticed that you've taken an interesting approach to your app development, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you put it out there for review before you had actually got the soft phone functionality in it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so in March, I did a video screenshot of Dart's, the SIP thing that we sponsored. Dart SIP user agent, it's called. It's not for marketing, it's just the title stone. Of showing me making a call, which goes into our OpenSIPs, which goes into our FreeSwitch cluster, and then rings the Shorebird portal, and the portal's got JS SIP in it, and that all works. So that was back in March. So then we took a step back to get the authentication backend in to our network. And if you look at I'm a host on Software Engineering Podcast. Software Engineering Radio is a big global sort of podcast that covers all sorts of different topics. And if you look at my list of people I've interviewed, you can kind of see what I'm up to at that point of the year, because I'm speaking to the experts in that field. So I did a great podcast with Justin Richer, who's one of the authors of the OAuth 2 spec. And he was like, if you're doing anything on the mobile, you need to do App Auth, which is a framework for securely getting a token and storing it on your public app. I need to use all this other stuff. So past 2 months were spent getting all that in. We use a fantastic open source project called Hydra, which is an OAuth 2 server. We try and talk about it as much as we can because it's great. So basically our API is now OAuth 2 fully compatible, and our portal is, which I've been trying to do for years. But unless you've got the reason to do it, you don't get around to it. And I just interviewed Matt Lacey, who specializes in mobile app usability, for the podcast. And one of the lasting pieces of advice he closed the podcast with was to make sure you get your app in the hands of customers and partners as soon as you've got something to test. So as soon as I completed that, you could actually log in to our platform. The app on your phone knows who you are. That's enough to get out and actually test it. So by the time you get on the public app stores, you've had maybe 6 months of every bit being crunched and broken on all sorts of devices. You don't have a bad launch, and you know where you are. And plus, it's great marketing, and you get customers involved, and you get feedback. And I might have underestimated how hard this is, because sometimes I'm like, oh my God, and then you solve it, and it's just a bit. Anyone that's listening, or yourself included, anyone involved in any type of technology knows it's hard, but when it works, you're just over the moon, and it's amazing, And I think we can all relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just give us the details of your engineering podcast again, please, Gavin, where people can find
SE Radio, se-radio.net. So if you go into any podcast thing, iTunes, and search Software Engineering Radio. Been going for about 10 years. There's almost about 10 hosts, and the quality of people we get to speak to is phenomenal. I've learned so much. So I was listening to it 2 years before. It took me 2 years to apply and get on as a host. And I've done maybe 7 shows now, maybe 8.
All right.
And it's backed by the IEEE. It's funded by them, and the Computer Society. It's properly, professionally recorded and edited. It's really good.
Sounds like a great resource. So you brought us up to speed. Your app is still in development, but you've got it out there, as you mentioned. And where is Shaw VoIP going next, Gavin?
Well, this year we're up for 4 awards. Weirdly, we're in finalists for Best VoIP in the UK. 7 of us in total. That's with the Internet Service Provider Association. And with the Internet Telephony, we're up for Best Small ITSP, Best Infrastructure, and Best something else. I can't remember. It goes on your turnover. We're a small company, but we're trusted and used by all companies, hotel chains, care homes, partner program. But having Ben, my son, you can only grow so much at the moment, and it works. So I can't complain.
Yeah. I've heard you and seen you describe Ben as your driving force for doing all this.
That's why I did there was a thing for Radio 4 interviewing business folk and anyone that was just turning 40. So I did a thing for them, and that's, like I said that on that podcast, where we've vastly overspent on what we actually need to do all this. But if something breaks, it doesn't matter, because there's loads of other stuff to take over. Everything will be replaced within 4 hours. If it does properly die, just because Ben sleeps so badly, we don't want to be woken up. So obviously, with your integrity, you'd build the best you can anyway. But that's one of the other reasons, is that we like our lives and we just want things to work.
Yes, it's the power of a great why, isn't it? The reason why you're doing these things. Great stuff. Well, we're coming towards an end of our time together, Gavin, and I'm very grateful for you coming to spend some time in the podcast studio. But before we close, is there anything else that you'd like to mention or say?
Just to really ask people to jump in and get involved in the communities, have a test of the thing we've open sourced, get into CG rates because it's fantastic. If you've got time, try and answer questions on the FreeSwitch mailing list. You might not think that you can contribute back to the community, but if you just start speaking about stuff and helping out and sharing any nuggets of information you've gleaned over the years, that really helps on the journey and just builds what we all take for granted potentially at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good that you should mention giving back to the community. I was speaking to David Bender only yesterday from America, and he was saying even the act of asking a question on a community forum is like a service to the community because it puts it up there on the internet and other people can find it and find the answer. So
my biggest bit of advice for that is come back and put down what the answer was, because so many people just disappear and don't follow up, and Google always takes.
Yeah, indeed. And I've also noticed that people will, ask a question, get an answer, and then maybe not come back and say whether it worked or not. And of course, give thanks to the person that put the answer up for them.
Yeah, I often find my own posts when I'm coming along and I forget something. I'm like, I've already been here. So that's a good thing about public internet. But yeah, so get involved with CG rates, get involved with the FreeSwitch mailing list, and get involved with the SIP user agent thing we've open sourced, and test it for us. That'd be great.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very, very much for coming along, Gavin. We're grateful for you giving your experience and sharing some of your journey and the tools, not only that you've used, but in some cases created and made them available via open source for other people as well. So we're very grateful. Thank you very much for coming along.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. All the best. See you next time.
Cheers.